think it's twice a week. Twice a week, like it's Tuesdays and Fridays.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
there are
it's in
like
the full schedule. If you get the printed booklet that has it, it'll tell which days have the actual seminars. And then there are prop seminars, there are costume seminars, there are all kinds of learning opportunities. So part of the festival experience.
I've seen the brochure and the schedules. They're all over the place. It looks like one copy of it. It's the one that looks like
love it. I mean, this
like
would be
this.
something I
I'm
would
sure they have them at.
Oh,
But that one.
oh, this one.
Yes.
I think I've got it. This is it.
Yeah.
Right?
So it'll tell you about those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
live 3 hours up the road. Oh, okay. Just before Christmas. And getting to know my geography. Yeah. So you went to a ride in early May?
Early May.
Early May. So you've been here 2 months.
Should I go in the middle? Where should I go?
You're gonna we'll put you in the middle.
You're the hot seat. In
It
the middle.
was very cruel of you to say there are refreshments over there. All that's left is beef.
Not my fault how much coffee swills down at
Take
9
charge.
a.m.
Take charge. Make sure you stay.
Yeah, we need a less calf than calf. I'll tell Bailey.
Bailey will do everything. Bailey will do everything.
She's a highly effective assistant bartender.
Yeah, I think we should get started. I'll get them.
Good morning, everyone. If you'd like to take your seats, we're going to reconvene here for our second play seminar of today. This morning, right now, we'll be discussing yesterday's preview of A Midsummer Night's Dream that was in the Randall Jones Theater. I hope you were lucky enough to see it. We have here with us today the director of that show. In case you weren't here in the first hour, we'll do a really quick introduction of who we are and what the format of today will be. My name is Kate McPherson. I am an English professor and the honors program director at Utah Valley University, which is about 3 hours north of here. I joined the faculty there in 2000, which was the year I started coming to shows here at Utah Shakes. I was lucky enough to grow up in a Shakespeare family. My father was a Shakespeare professor, and I think saw my first professional production of an Elizabethan play, which was Dr. Faustus, by the way, when I was 7 years old at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So
good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Moncrief. Kate and Kate. This is the Kate in the Morning Show. If you holler Kate, someone is going to answer your question. I'm the chair of English and a Shakespeare scholar at Washington College in Maryland, on the other side of the country. And I'm lucky enough that my best friend and longtime collaborator lives in Utah. So I've been coming to the Utah Shakespeare Festival for a while. Kate and I first met as graduate students at the Folger Shakespeare Library and have worked on a number of projects together, several books, the Internet Shakespeare editions, if you've ever used that online resource. And this is our first season working together here as literary seminar directors. So some of you will be familiar with Nancy, who has retired this year. She'll be coming back to enjoy the shows. And with Ace Pilkington, who will be in for a couple of seminars over the course of the summer. So how many of you are first timers for the festival? Oh my gosh, so the opposite of that question. Everybody has been here before.
our director is.
So welcome, welcome back. Kirsten is our first timer, so we're gonna help our newcomer here. So welcome back, 56th season. We're really delighted to have you here today. So Midsummer Night's Dream, it's a pretty familiar play, right? How many of you have seen this one before? Yep. So you know the story a lot. I'm not going to spend too much time on the background. We're going to move really quickly to talking with the director and talking about the production. But let me just make note of the fact that this play is composed in 1595, 1596, basically right after Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. So he's pretty interested in this story from Ovid, Pyramus, and Thisbe, and he's looking at it in a couple of different ways. These two plays, Midsummer and Romeo and Juliet, 1595, As You Like It, 1599, and Shakespeare in Love, which is also set in the 1590s. We have a season that's really speaking to each other and firmly rooted in this particular Elizabethan period. This particular play is one of the most adapted of all of Shakespeare's plays. Hamlet is the most adapted, but in terms of references in popular culture, you see this absolutely everywhere. Some notable productions, you might know the 1968 film that had Judi Dench and Diana Rigg in it. You might be familiar with Peter Brook's very important 1970 production that set this in a white box, right? Taking it out of the Elizabethan environment, a completely different kind of concept, which might be really relevant to the choices made today. This is also Shakespeare sort of inventing the genre of romantic comedy. In a comedy, the arc that you're going to see over and over again is courtship, impediments to courtship, and a resolution. Marriages at the end. So enough on the background. Let's turn to Kirsten, and I'm going to start because I think this is. You know what? I'm going to backtrack for just a second on that. Yesterday's production was a preview. If you were there, you were aware that a few things had to be dealt with. And we'll ask Kirsten to talk about that. But I want to acknowledge somebody who's usually in the background. Where is Bailey?
Bailey Smith, the fabulous Miss Bailey Smith.
Bailey
who
does everything.
Gallantly read Puck's part.
She's the assistant director on the production, but she's also our assistant every morning for these seminars. So we love Bailey. Well, we may draw her into the discussion a little bit as we move on. So before we talk about the preview and maybe the issue of Puck, could you just talk in general about your concept and vision for this production, and maybe also your history with Midsummer? Because we come to these plays, certainly in midlife, we've had lots of experiences with them. So your relationship to Midsummer, and then what you chose to do here.
Sure. So hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. So Midsummer for me is one of my absolute favorite plays. I teach at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm a continuing lecturer there. And I teach an introduction to directing class. And every year I alternate with my intro students, McBee. I'm not going to say it, even though we're not in a theater. We're close enough. And someone said it the other day in my rehearsal, which is why I think yesterday happened. So I'm highly superstitious. So we won't even go there. Right? So I alternate between McBee and Midsummer every year with my students. So I feel this play is just, I could sit here and probably perform the whole thing, which I will not do. But I never directed it until last year. And I had the opportunity to direct it with college students at San Jose State University. And when you're directing Shakespeare with college students who aren't in a Shakespeare program or have a lot of background with Shakespeare, you kind of have to go line for line on what every single moment means in order to make it relevant to them. And it was such a joyous time. And I went, I'm so happy I'm finally getting to direct Midsummer, because it was actually the first Shakespeare play I ever saw at ACT in San Francisco with Annette Bening played, and another friend of mine played Hippolyta, but Annette Bening was in that production, and it was altering for me. But to direct it with students was really about, wow, I really need to know this text better than I ever have. And so coming here to do it with people that know the text, but also to be able to be open to discoveries within the text. And we've made some really great discoveries with it. And I never like to I've directed a couple Shakespeare plays multiple times, but I always like to come in fresh and see what is going to unfold with this group of people that I have. But you asked about the setting. So when Brian Vaughn and David Ivers talked to me about coming, I said, I would love to. I have been bugging them for years to let me come direct for them. So it was nice that being a pest paid off.
Persistence and determination are omnipotent.
Nevertheless,
Exactly.
she persisted.
Nevertheless, I persisted. We were discussing that it was going to be indoors. And I was very excited about doing this indoors. I've done a lot of outdoor Shakespeare festivals, but indoors, there's a little more play because you can do a little more things with design. And I said, for me, this play really speaks to a pivotal point in our history, which is the 1920s, which is the women's right to vote, but also a time when we're dealing with a lot of heavy ideas from the Victorian era that are really sort of archaic and draconian. And how do we bump up against that and still honor those ideas that are rooted in our society, but also how do we then start to move forward? And so the 1920s being a beautiful period in terms of decadence, but also a period of great expansion. We have the Industrial Revolution going on. There's a huge expansion of the art movement. We start to see Cubism and different ways of viewing the world in different perspectives starting in that time. And so I felt that this plays about dreams. From the Cubists, you got the Surrealists who are really about dream vocabulary. And so it just felt like the right period to put the play in
Plus Freud.
Plus Freud. You get psychoanalysis and all that happening at the same time. So that was one of the main reasons behind choosing this period. And I also don't like to get too close. If I'm going to change the time period in any way, I don't like to get too close to our own time in a play like this, because then you have all sorts of, you got to deal with cell phones, and that's just, I don't want to go there. So that was the idea behind the 1920s. And talk about some gorgeous costumes. Those of you that saw it, Brenda did an amazing, I mean, the costumes are just gorgeous. And it helped us figure out a lot about what the fairyland was going to be, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, the opulence of that time period is so visually appealing. The Art Deco design is something that, we're never going to get over how beautiful that is. And it's always going to be something I think that we come back to as an artistic touchstone in the.
Let's go ahead and open up that question of the woods. So this play, along with As You Like It, starts in a courtly situation. Here we have Athens, we have problems happening, and the woods are often thought of as a kind of escape. We talk about As You Like It as a pastoral comedy that really subverts and takes a turn here. Here they go out into the woods expecting to find liberty and freedom, and they get kind of a nightmare in this dream. So could you talk about your idea for the woods and the fairyland?
Of course. The key touchstone word for me in this whole production is balance. And we start this play in a world completely out of balance. Athens, I mean, Aegeus can kill his daughter because of the law. And so the world is not in balance. It's definitely cold and sterile. But going to the forest, they're also out of balance. There's a war between the king and queen of the fairies. All is not well. The world is upside down and topsy-turvy. So it's been about trying to bring that balance together by the end of the play, that there's a harmonious coupling that happens not just through marriage, but through ideology. So the forest for us was really inspired by whimsy and the ballet russe of the time. So a lot of the costumes are sort of harken back to the ballet russe in that expressive joy, and Erte. Erte was our big touchstone for the whole production as well.
Absolutely. So one more technical question. This is in a repertory company, and so you come in and much of this has been cast for you. You also had really took advantage of doubling in this production. Could you talk about those choices?
Sure. So yes, as you said, a lot of the shows cast for you when you come in as a director, but working with Brian and David as to how I'm going to double the show, I was told how many actors I would have. And when I did it with the university, I did not have to double anybody. So it was fantastic.
All the kids want a part.
Everybody got a part. It was great. But here it was a really, what am I going to do with the fairies who are going to be the entourage to Tanya? And so we decided to double them with the mechanicals. And what that does is it allows for Bottom, when he goes into the dream world, to sort of have a Wizard of Oz moment in that I recognize all of you, but yet I don't recognize all of, it's that weird, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there moment that he gets to have. And so his dream then, for him to buy that he had this dream, even though maybe he did, maybe he didn't, depending on how you view the show, has a lot more relevance to him in that regard. So, and then double casting, of course, it's the traditional double casting of Oberon and Titania with Theseus and Hippolyta. And Philostrate and Puck are also double cast because they serve the same function. They are both the bringers of mirth to the king. Philostrate, gets everybody excited and brings him, here's a list of plays you can see. And Puck is the same thing. His first line is I make Oberon smile. So we wanted to keep people that sort of functions and look at that idea of the shadow self as well, particularly with Puck. One is kind of, which those of you who were here yesterday didn't get to see our Puck. We saw Bailey. Bailey, awesome. She captured a lot of the spirit of Puck. But our Puck is very mischievous. And Philostrate, it's kind of the Harpo to the Groucho, if you look at it that way in terms of Philostrate and Puck. Puck being the Harpo, Philostrate being the Groucho characters.
I want to ask one more question of
And then we'll
Kirsten
turn to the
before we'll
audience.
turn it over to the audience. And I had one gentleman raise your hand again. Okay, I'll come back to you in just a second. We noticed yesterday, and this was a choice of the sound effects with the magical gestures. And so without Puck's physical presence on the stage, the actors did a phenomenal job persisting through that. But can you talk about the gesture and sound business?
Sure. So one of the things you have to make a decision on very early on when you do this play is how magic works and how much magic are you going to use. And we had to have magic conversations. And what kind of magic is this? How is that magic going to function? What is this magic doing to the other person? Because every time we use magic in the play, it's to either manipulate or do something to someone else, either another fairy, which is kind of, we actually had to create some rules that if you do magic on another fairy, that is not okay. And so what does that mean if you're going to do something to another fairy? But also how you manipulate the humans in this world. And working with Barry, who is an amazing sound designer and composer, we were able to sort of create audio soundscape that helps the audience understand, oh, that's a magic moment. Not to confuse that with the Disney magic moment, but it is a magic moment within the show.
Yeah, so it was both the physical action of the actor, but then we had these whooshing and
right. And a lot of the technical process was the actors doing something and Barry going, is that magic? Because I need a sound cue. And so now we got married to this idea of sound cues. So I told them yesterday, I said, you cannot freelance sound cues anymore. No more adding more physical moves that look like magic.
Right. You have to do something else with your hands. All right. Well, so shall we turn to the audience now, gentlemen?
Greetings and salutations, and exceptionally well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was a nice recovery from a situation that was completely uncontrollable, and it was well done. 3 comments. The costumes were glorious. The setting was marvelous. The stage, I thought, was exceptionally well integrated with the high and low and all of that interaction between the high and the low. It seemed to have played very well. My one comment is in relation to the initial response of Titania and Oberon in those very initial meetings, how she was very aloof and very cold. And I thought the transition through to the father and daughter, names are always hard. Hermia and her father. I thought that transition all the way from the very beginning, and it connected all the way at that very end, was well done. Comments or thoughts?
Thank you so much.
That was a beautiful choice at the end with the father-daughter. Kate and I both were pleasantly surprised by that. We had never seen that before, and I've seen an awful lot of Midsummer. So
I have a soft spot for Aegeus. I just do. And I think that because this play for me is about balance and about recognizing sometimes we're myopic in our viewpoint, and to open yourself up, that became a very important moment for me in this play. So thank you.
Well done. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And I have a question about your process. There's so many little funny bits of business in this. And I wonder now, did something happen in rehearsal and you said, that's great, keep it in? Or did you plan all of this, getting caught in the beads or, fumbling something or just all, missing your cue and running in fast and all of those little bits of business? How did you develop all of that?
Well, one of the things that I love about theater, it is a collaboration. And Brian and David did a brilliant job in bringing very funny people to this cast. A lot of what I do is starting and stopping points. Is like, this is where I know we begin and this is where we need to end. And I consider myself a sculptor of actors. And so my job, and I'm very exhausted by the end of rehearsal because I actively watch. And what I'm looking for is that impulse that's either being stifled or so that I can say, what was going on there? Why did you stop? And usually when I can catch an actor self-editing, something beautiful was about to happen. And so it's really getting them to trust the safe environment of the rehearsal room and to brilliantly fail in the rehearsal room and do something so incredibly unfunny, because then we know it's unfunny. Or to do something so brilliant that we are hurting because we're laughing so hard. Now, this group, there's a lot of funny bones in this group. It's about reeling them back. I'm like, okay, that's great. Come back to us. The text is important. Bring it back. But I am so happy that they had that that they gave me the gift of being very present. And I told them, I said, I want bold choices. I have very clear ideas as to who each of these characters are, where they exist in the play, and a lot of one-on-one work and character development. We have these secondary rehearsals where I can just kind of sit with an actor and kind of talk through their track and what happens, and all of that conversation then lends itself to the rehearsal process. But as a director, I like to be open and fluid to what might happen within it. And a lot of stuff that's on stage I didn't expect when I got here, but that led us to that path. So each cast you have, this is why we see Midsummer so many times, is because the people in the room shift the ideas of the play or augment them or heighten them. And so so that's pretty much my process, is like navigating the river with them, and then of course being the benevolent dictator and saying no.
So we have a question here, and then we have one in the front.
Thank you. One quick comment about Puck and the show must go on. I wonder, and then I have a follow-up. I wonder if choosing to have Puck be a disembodied spirit would be a director's choice at any point in time. I thought it was absolutely magical. I'm a physical scientist, so the magic of the theater is critically important for one part of my brain that would otherwise atrophy. It's true, despite being the product of a liberal arts education on the East Coast. But my question for you has to do, you talked about the sound design, which is epically helpful for those magic pieces, and choosing rules for magic, that it's not just in and out, it's the product of a decision. What about the lighting design? Can you comment on some of the choices there? Choosing to have actors in blackout versus in subtle light versus bright light versus colors and those design elements.
Well, first of all, Kirk Bookman is fantastic and a brilliant lighting designer, and he had a hard task working with me because I'm married to a lighting designer. So
you know the business just a little.
Yeah, and so I'm like, so Kirk, I'm married to a lighting designer, and he's like, yeah, I know. I said, okay, but he's just a gem, and just we talk through a lot of what the show was, and there's a sterileness to Athens. So the idea of kind of harsher light, and it's a growth towards warmth with Athens. But most of this play takes place at night. So how are you going to do night and still see faces? Became sort of our dilemma. But because we lifted it into this Art Deco fairy world that we have, we were able to actually give the quality of it being night without ever being dark. A lot of the text informed when people were in shadow, when they weren't. And a lot of it also was in the moment. Do we need light on them while they do that? No, because she said, you're going to leave me in shadow. So no, they should kind of be in the dark, and we should be struggling to see them because they're struggling to see. The magic, it also, that Wagnerian idea of total art theater where set, light, costumes, acting, everything has to coalesce. As we were working with the magic sound cues, it's how does that marry then with what's going on visually and with light? If the actor's doing a gesture or doing something to another fairy, and there's a sound cue, if the light doesn't shift in some way or pulse, then it doesn't lift the moment in a way that it could. So a lot of that technical process was really important for us in terms of lighting, and Kirk was just right there with it and dove right in. So it was, and I feel light also is the unsung hero of theater. It makes you feel in a way that, and it can make you, light can make you sad. Light can make you happy. It can actually lift you to your feet. And so very subtle psychological things going on with lighting in the show that I'm really thrilled about. Thank you.
Okay, it's me again. Few things. First, Mr. Newcomb's bottom was one of the most inspired and theatrical that I've ever.
It was magnificently
seen.
theatrical.
I heard from Jeffrey that Hippolyta's first act costumes presented something of a challenge, but I mostly wanted to ask about the evolution of, and this could relate back to the dream world thing, the evolution of the relationship between Theseus and Hippolyta, because at the beginning, the way you have it staged, she's pulling on a flask to get away from this guy. But by the end, she looks very content to be settling down as Queen of Athens with him, and how that relates to the Oberon and Titania, particularly since their reconciliation is not on stage.
I know it's nice that reconciliation's not on stage. So one of the things I joked about in rehearsal was how I wanted to sometime in the middle of the show just have Theseus and Hippolyta ride through on horses so we could see that they were getting to know each other. Because I always feel it's like all of a sudden there's animosity. And I really do feel that I've seen productions of this play where they're like, oh, we can't wait to get married. And I just feel it loses a bite.
Well,
There has
and
to be a
it's-
journey.
It's not in the text. I mean,
No,
he
but
says,
I've
"I wooed thee with my sword."
Right.
And
And done thy and won thy heart doing the injuries. It's like she's not exactly pleased. So we do this little signing of a treaty or signing of whatever you think it is, the marriage contract at the beginning to show this is an on paper relationship that maybe can grow into something else. When I joked about that, my dramaturg Leslie Cross said, well, because of the doubling, the Theseus and Hippolyta fight or animosity is reconciled through what happens with Oberon and Titania. And I said, okay, I mean, of course that's what's happening. But I always want to have just I want one more little nugget with the two of them. Maybe if I make a movie, I'll do that. But the reconciliation with with Titania and Oberon is so interesting because her last line as Titania before we go back to Athens is, tell me how it came to be that, tell me how I was sleeping here. Sleeping here found with these mortals on the ground. It rhymes. So she just says, I know something happened. You need to tell me what it is. And originally I wanted him to put the donkey head on. My first concept was that Oberon would go, I am the ass, and put the head on and walk off stage with her. But then I realized that would maybe convey something I didn't want conveyed to the audience. But that idea of him accepting his guilt, and I think the pivotal point in the play is his monologue that he gives before he wakes her up. When he says, I have the boy, his whole quest has been to get this changeling child. That's all he wants. And now he has it. And what a shallow victory that is. And it's hollow. He didn't gain anything. He didn't get what he really wanted, which was her love. And so that speech when he says is his I am the ass speech is what I've kind of called it, because he has to come to terms with he just did a horrible thing and he's going to have to pay for it, and he needs to pay for it. He needs
humiliated the woman he loves.
He has, absolutely. And so in her waking, we've actually played a lot with her waking up and how that works, and her coming out of this dream of being enamored and in love with someone and seeing the guy she does love. If she didn't love him, this play would not work. But she's furious with him because she's just developed this. And that's one of the reasons we have a changeling child in the show, is because you need to see the innocent object of what she wants to take care of and what he's unwilling to allow into their coupling.
And her testimonial about why she loves that child is, to me, I mean, maternity is one of my scholarly areas of expertise in the Renaissance period, but like her testimony about the relationship she had with the boy's mother and how she died in childbirth and she cares for this child, it's deeply meaningful to her.
And that's Oberon's jealous. He's jealous of the child, which I think happens a lot when people have children. There's this, all of a sudden there's another entity. I mean, my kid's running around here. I don't know where she is. Somewhere. Oh, she's over there. Oh, hi, babe. We're going to go get her dad today so he can come see the shows. He's flying in. But this idea of jealousy that starts to exist when you start to have children and how you rejigger your relationship a little bit, but yet still have that love and that intimacy that you want to have. I mean, I think it's a balancing act. And so when she wakes up and sees the lovers on the ground, sees this guy, and we talked a lot with Melinda about how long it takes for her to process everything. And it's not until Shakespeare gives her that last rhyming couplet at the end that she's like, hold on, what just happened? Because you're going to tell me. And he has to go. And we worked a lot with that last moment of stop, land it. And him and, Jay Todd just goes, walks off with her. His one gesture of just, okay, I'm going to tell you, instead of like, oh, he could leave in so many different ways, but his body language is telling us a story.
He has to own it.
He has to own it and has to tell her, which then allows Theseus and Hippolyta to come back in reconciled. To get back to your original comment.
Hi. A wonderful production. The child was great. I mean, wow.
They're
Well done.
4.
Huh?
They're 4 years old, just so y'all
Wow.
know.
Very
There's
nice.
2 that
There's
alternate in
2
the
that
role.
double.
My question is regarding, you had mentioned earlier about the comedy and choices and actor choices, your choices, things like that. There was a moment where it was Lysander and Hermia are downstage right, and Helena's up on the ladder, and Demetrius is underneath, and he was reaching for her foot while they're having their moment, and upstaging the moment completely. I just didn't know if that was an actor choice at the time or directed.
You guys are our first audience, and the number of moments of, okay, this moment stole that moment, that's what we're calibrating, and why I'm so thankful to have the rehearsal that is a preview, so that we know what's funny, and we've learned to not pay attention to some stuff, but you guys coming in with fresh eyes and seeing all that. Yeah, I have a long list of little notes of that's pulling my focus. I need to be here so that the story and the heart of the play continues to unfold within the highly physical zaniness of the lover scene. Thank you for pointing that out too, because I'm like, yay, that's on my list. It is very funny, but there's a way to hold the funny and hold the text that is about preview.
Might be something that just has to be dialed back just a tad, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is about calibration at this point and orchestrating at this point. Once you start to have audiences in and see where their eyes going and what they're responding to, and each audience is so distinctly different, but you're such the needed part of our process because we're creating that for you. And there's things I want you to hear and we want you to hear that if we lose them within a really great sight gag, we're not doing our job. It may be funny, but we want you to feel something at the end of the play too.
I've seen about 10 different Midsummer productions, so I was a little hesitant in coming again because I don't want to wear out a play, but I'm really glad I did because I really enjoyed it. I thought your thing really crackled along, lots of energy. I loved it, you know. But as I've watched it over the years and read about it, it comes to me, although it is a romantic comedy, to seem more and more misogynistic. And you talked about doubling of characters, and the doubling of plots and balance. But Aegeus uses the law to claim right of death over his daughter because he wants her happiness. So his choice is supreme and he can enforce that. And as you said about Oberon's jealousy, I don't think it's even jealousy because he does not know the child. It's a matter of power. I want it because you have it. And you say that he kind of doesn't get what he wants, but it wasn't the child. It's domination. And that's why I have, at the very end, when you have the dumb show reconciliation between him and his daughter, I think it lets the tyrannical father off just a little too easily. Because what's happened is that the penalties of tyranny have been evaded, but the tyranny is still intact. That law is still there. And I find that a little, it disturbs the comic aspect.
No, I absolutely appreciate what you're saying and the thought. We've talked a lot about what that reconciliation is and who's the first to give. And last night, Hermia went to him first, as opposed to him asking for forgiveness. Normally, it's him coming in, and I think that's something I'm so happy you made this comment because it's kind of been on my mind, but not at the forefront with all the other stuff I'm handling at the moment. But I do. This play is about domination, and the text itself. I mean, as we start to enter sort of this next realm of existence in philosophy and the way women and men treat each other, there is I just did the Scottish play a couple years ago, and the be a man, be a man, be a man, that sort of toxic masculinity of that play is really different now in contemporary society. And I think that's why we continue to look at Shakespeare too, is how does it resonate today? But I absolutely thank you for that comment, because I know what I need to fix now in order to not let him off the hook so easily.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too to think about this along with Romeo and Juliet, right? We get two fathers trying to marry off their daughters. There are lots of conduct books in the early modern period that tell households how they're supposed to exist. The duties of fathers to daughters, of children to parents, of servants to masters, and that the father's duty was to match up his daughter. But here we see an even more tyrannical version, perhaps.
And Kate, after there's
Right here.
one here in the front.
And then where? Up here. Got it.
Sometimes with a comedy by Shakespeare, I forget that the more serious elements aren't really going to play out. But I thought it was a nice touch that when Hippolyta heard her husband to be basically listening to this father who was willing to have his daughter put to death for not obeying him. And he offered her the choice of being a nun for the rest of her life, or dying, or marrying the man that she didn't love. And that was a really good touch, the way you could sort of see the wheels clicking in Hippolyta's mind, thinking, well, this guy overpowered me, and now he's just continuing in the same vein with this other woman in a situation that's very, very unpleasant for her. But in the Shakespearean comedy, it's hard to remember sometimes that things, I forget which the two male lovers has the line, the course of love never runs smooth. I mean, that's really for me, that's really the theme of the play. It's eventually going to, theme maybe the wrong word, the play is eventually going to work out. You know, when you hear that line, if you didn't already know it, you realize that eventually things are going to work out for the lovers, and then we shouldn't maybe take the more serious elements that are offered in the play too seriously. It is supposed to be a comedy after all. But then some of Shakespeare's comedies aren't terribly funny. I mean, Measure for Measure is classified as a comedy sometimes. And
that's a much later play. If you
That's
think about
true,
the
too.
early romantic comedies, and then the way that Shakespeare changes, develops, subverts, and the way that those comedies, those problem plays, become a lot more difficult as he matures in his career.
One of the things you guys did not get to see because we did not have Puck Philostrate on stage. And for me, the text works, physical language and the unspoken can have as much weight as what is spoken. And when Theseus walks up stage, because you can either die the death, he has a word, or, and usually when Philostrate, dressed as a woman, is on stage, she whispers in his ear. And so he just catches something and turns around, or you can become a nun. So I actually have the option given to him by another character in that moment. And the way the stage is balanced, the men are all on one side, the women are on the other. And the women are all, are we really having to sit here and listen to this?
Is this actually
on one side and the men on the other? So that was one of the little things you guys missed, and I missed in not having her on stage last night, was the power of the silence. And I think Hippolyta owns that. She has very little text, and yet her presence is palpable. So thank you. Yeah, Melinda was my Lady M when I did McBee a couple years ago down in Santa Cruz. So she's a force, that woman.
My question is really just about yesterday's performance. Although Bailey did an outstanding job,
she's awesome.
And as an audience member, I felt like I was in on the joke with the cast, which was really fun too. But my question is, why do you wait so long to do your understudy rehearsals?
I do not know. This is my first time here. So a lot of companies that I've worked with that do big festivals as well, usually the understudy rehearsals are the week after opening because everybody's still in rehearsal. Everybody's in.
They're just too busy.
There's just too many hours, and this is, all the trains are leaving the station. Everybody's opening and previewing this week, and the level of exhaustion is, and particularly the non-equity actors. I mean, I've got Taylor who plays Snug the Joiner in my show. He's in Romeo and Juliet and As You Like It. So he only has one day off a week. And so until the shows are open and there's more hours in the day, I mean, I'm assuming that's the reason, because that's how it has been at other festivals. But the understudy situation on Midsummer was Puck's understudy is Madison, who plays First Fairy and Starveling. So we had to make a choice yesterday as do we put her in as an understudy and kind of, I don't want to say mess up, because I thought there was some beautiful things happening yesterday with what happened, but do we compromise two worlds, not just the fairy world, but the mechanical world as well by doing that, and then put in her another understudy. And so it was really, we had about an hour and a half to make a choice yesterday from when we found out Kelly was that ill. And believe me, no actor wants to not do a show. And but man, everybody Purell and Lysol. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hand
you-
washing,
You
everyone.
probably know this, but if you pick up the festival souvenir program, the big one, there's a massive doubling chart. So I think almost all the actors are in 3 shows. So you can see how
Yeah.
hard they're all working. And a repertory company, there aren't that many left in the U.S. These directors only get a few hours a week with their particular cast because so many shows are rehearsing at once. Question over here.
In community theater, we don't have the luxury of what you have. We are your critics, if you will, for yesterday.
Speak into the microphone.
For yesterday. And we're telling you that we like this show. And we're telling you that we liked that you came out and told us what was happening. Somebody was sick and you couldn't help it. But what I need to know is in community theater, after a performance, before we present it for the audience that comes in, the director gets the whole cast together and everybody hears what needs to be changed. And my question to you is, are you going to do that with this group, or are you going to individually say, we need to do a little different here or there?
So I think your question's really about the note process. So because of rules, union rules and stuff, immediately after our shows, because they're matinees, if I want to have an hour of notes, I have to borrow it from another rehearsal. There's a whole complicated thing. But what I will do Friday morning is the next time I have everyone, I start my day with a note session. Sometimes, depending on how many notes I have, like after a first couple run-throughs, I spend about 6 hours writing notes that I individually send to all of the actors, very specific notes about what line, what they're doing, how I'd like to see it changed. But then occasionally it'll be like, oh, Puck versus Fairy, they'll get the same note. So they know I gave one of them a note so they can incorporate, they both know what the shift is. And my stage manager, of course, gets all of my notes so that he knows what I've changed, because some of it's staging. I said, oh, don't do that here, do this here, there, etc. But the community of coming together as a group to say, hey guys, you did a fantastic job. We're almost there. Let's lift it to the next level. And these are the changes we need to make to get there. That's super important. I love to do that after a show, but here I can't. So it has to sort of wait to that next day, but that absolutely happens. And that level of creating the ensemble with the actors is so much a part of why I do theater. And these guys have just, particularly with the preview yesterday, came together as an ensemble, and I'm super proud of all of them.
Thank you. We've mentioned this in the 9 o'clock seminar, but I'm going to just apologize for the noise going on here and let you know that this is necessary noise. We have some retractable shades being installed that were a little bit back ordered. Yeah, for those of you who maybe sat like this for a half an hour, that's the work that's going on. So we're going to put up with the noise because it's going to be great to have those in. We have just a few more minutes with our director. Are there other questions or comments? People who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Let's see. Raise your hand really high so I can see who you are. Yes, great.
So did Bailey really only have an hour and a half to prepare for that?
Bailey did not we did not say Bailey, because at first they wanted me to do it.
Oh my.
And
That's
sure.
too much
And
for
you know, and I told Bailey a story when we first started that when I was her age and an assistant, I assisted on a production of Hamlet. And the final designer run through, our Hamlet had to go shoot a pilot in LA and I had to play Hamlet. I never want to do that again. Hamlet's hard. And Bailey said, Bailey actually volunteered.
I did.
And I said, great, but she did not know until noon that she was definitely doing it, although she had an idea that we might make that choice. And so yeah, she had an hour and a half.
I mean, really, I had 2 months of rehearsal in the room to watch the process. So it was easier for me than anybody else to take that over.
Well, and that's the thing about having a fantastic assistant like Bailey is they asked me to do it because I know the timings. I know where Puck needs to be vocally to make the show keep going instead of just bringing somebody in to read the text. But a great assistant also knows all those things, actually probably better than I do in some respects, because she's watching, I have her watch a lot of stuff that I don't have 5 sets of eyes to see. She's another set for me. So talk about an amazing artist.
I think with Bailey, when I first heard her, I thought, oh yeah, she's over here instead of, but I kind of observed. I was where I could see her a little bit, and I saw her getting more into the role as the play went on and became more animated with her voice and me. And the first little bit seemed to be a little bit hesitant, but she jumped right into it. And
you witness someone rising to the occasion.
That was
and it's
exactly
not
the
something,
phrase I was going to use.
It's not something we actually get to visually see and hear often in our lifetime. And so I'm honored that she did such a great job. Thank you.
That's live theater too, that we were all a part of that experience.
How's it going to turn out? I don't know.
The show
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It was very interesting to experience it with the missing puck. But one of the things I want to remark that congratulations to either the board, the lighting board op, or the lighting designer who kept her lit up and down when needed. I don't know if anybody else besides me noticed that, but I love the fact that somebody managed to work that in. One other spot, I don't know if I'm the only person to notice, but I appreciate it and I hope as a director that when Hippolyta made her exit at the beginning and she stopped off to say something to Hermia, I thought was a delightful, wonderful touch. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And one of the things I just want to say about that moment was we're going to add another little moment at the end after the lovers make up, because I, like with Aegeus and Hermia, I kind of tied those together. I didn't tie Hippolyta and Hermia together. And so that's something I'm going to implement in just so that there's a through line of that comment. Thank you.
Who else is next here?
There's a
Right over
gentleman
here.
with the umbrella. Yeah, while we make that transition, I wanted to comment about what a beautiful fit I thought this season was. Because if you think about Romeo and Juliet, it's a play that starts out like it's going to be a comedy. It's very funny. There's all kinds of wonderful, hilarious things happening, and then it turns on a dime. Midsummer Night's Dream is the inverse of that. It starts as a tragedy. Everything at the beginning of this play is going very badly. There's dissension in the magical world. There's dissension in the leadership. Fathers and daughters are divided. Men are abandoning the women that they've made love to. It's not a good thing. And the play then reverses itself in a really beautiful direction. And that's just the script. And then what's done with it physically changes every time. And it's great.
And I had to say it was great. I directed Romeo and Juliet a couple years ago in Arizona, where David Ivers is now. And having directed that play and then dove back into Midsummer, the parallels, I mean, just Capulet and Aegeus, just that it's heartbreaking on one level too, just in terms of fathers. But
I was just curious what your journey was as a director from a young person seeing A Midsummer Night's Dream in San Francisco to today. How did you become the director of A Midsummer Night's Dream? That's my first of three. You can answer these as you will. My second is there any particular challenge or challenges that you met in this production that you're particularly proud of overcoming? And the third is that you perhaps didn't overcome.
Wow, that's a lot. So I have always been a fan of the theater. I ran an alternative or avant-garde theater company in San Diego for a little less than a decade before I jumped into directing more mainstream work. And I won't say mainstream as I love what I do. But at Sledgehammer, the company I ran, I did the Scottish play, and I also did Richard III, was the very first Shakespeare play I ever directed. And that company was about reinterpreting classics. And so I come in with an idea of how to reinterpret it, but yet honor the text, because I think Shakespeare's a genius, and I don't want to mess with it, because why mess with something so exquisite? One of the big challenges with this play is keeping the momentum of that second half, because the play kind of ends when the lovers wake up and Theseus says, great, we're all going to go get married. But you've got 25 more minutes to hold you guys in that play within the play that only a good parent would go sit through and be proud of their children. So how do you hold that? And a lot of that for us was about how much the mechanicals love theater. If the mechanicals were just like, oh, we're going to do this so we can get paid, then there's no heart in it. And that has been the biggest challenge, is that play within the play. I also have 6 very funny actors that I'm like, okay, we have to give to this person now. And it's about calibrating that a lot. But that's been really a challenge, but also an opportunity. And we're still trimming some of, and you also in that play within the play have all these horrible things that the court says. They're totally bashing the play. And so, and I cut probably 75% of their comments because it's just has this start and stop feel to it.
And it can be very tedious. I have been bored at the end of any number of Midsummer productions because the court goes on and on and on.
And one of the things we did yesterday was we did a speed through, and the strategically placed speed through is in the director's toolkit. Is when you have the actors just do it fast. Do their staging, but do it fast. And I think we shaved like 5 minutes off that play within the play yesterday before they did the final. And it just helped make it sizzle, because the actors realized at that point they don't need to take all the pauses, and that to trust the humor and trust the text. And that's the big thing with Shakespeare, is you just have to trust him. And if you don't trust him, it reads on stage. And so that's been a huge opportunity. I mean, there's too many to list in our remaining 30 seconds, but
So that play
thank
within
you.
a play. I just want to compliment this beautifully programmed season, right? The way that these plays are speaking to each other. In the previous seminar, we had Brian with us in the morning, and we were talking about how Shakespeare in Love is really a Valentine to the theater, and there are all these inside theater jokes. Shakespeare does that in A Midsummer Night's Dream, right? He's parodying, and there's a lot of love in that little play within a play. It's his sort of Shakespeare in Love moment of giving us the insider bits of how one does a play. Really delightful.
And just a note about the play within the play, we went back and looked at 1920s ways of presenting Shakespeare, and that's what Jamie Newcomb is doing. He is affecting the voice of the 1920s Shakespearean actor in only the way Jamie Newcomb can. But just so you know, that's an homage to that same time period we're in the acting style that we're using on stage, as is the actor warm-up that they do in the forest.
Oh, that's
it's
so
absolutely
funny.
From the time period.
That's hilarious. It's a wonderful to hear that what a challenge that was for this super talented professional company, because I've often called that Pyramus and Thisbe play, it's a foolproof piece of theater. Like 4th graders can put it on, and guess what? It's funny. People will laugh in the same spots for children that they will for professionals, because that is comedy gold. But it's such gold with these talented actors that you had to work to get them to, put it in a structure that worked for this production. But you got big laughs yesterday, and that was wonderful to hear.
I think we have time for one more comment if there's someone who hasn't had a chance to speak yet.
Or if you'd like to take a
one
break.
in the back.
Oh,
Okay,
one
good.
in the back.
I
We'll do
gotta
one
jog
in
a
the
little
back,
bit.
and
Let's
then
meet in the middle.
Then we'll have a break.
I just wanted to comment that I really loved at the end where Oberon and Titania walked off together with the changeling child. And again, it was one of those silent scenes that I thought was really poignant, that it showed that they both won, that it wasn't just conceding everything to Oberon, but Titania got something out of it as well.
Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting how children have manifested themselves in my work since I became a parent.
Funny that.
So I do think that family and having children on stage is really important. And these 2 lovely, amazing Cedar City kids, I will just speak out of school a little bit, but when Melinda first did the speech with an actual child instead of the doll that we had been using, it actually was a true moment of beauty and tears in looking at this child as to why that child was important to her. So thank you for that comment.
That's great. Well, so we are out of time for today. Let's please give Kirsten a hand. That was a wonderful, wonderful discussion. As we said, there's going to be an actor seminar here in about 5 minutes, and we will be joined by Quinn and Betsy in just a few minutes, but there is time for you to take a short break.